Hello everybody, and welcome to How to Make a Budget. In the age of credit cards and sites where you can pay at the click of a button, most people in America are not careful about the way that they spend money. They'll just buy things that they want and hope they'll not hurt them later, along with little consideration for their financial future. However, this does not have to be the case. There is a way to spend money and know that it'll not hurt you later. This way of spending money is called budgeting. What is budgeting? Essentially, budgeting is planning out how you are going to spend your money over a certain period of time. However, the question could be asked, why should we budget? There are a few reasons why one should budget. First, the concept of budgeting and planning is in line with what the Bible teaches about planning ahead. This is seen in passages like Proverbs 21:5 and 20, as well as Luke 14:20-30. Luke 14:28-30 says, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish." In this passage, Jesus is talking about counting the cost of following him, and this demonstrates counting the cost is considered a wise thing to do, which is why he was using it as an example. Imagine someone trying to build a skyscraper, but they do not plan ahead everything that needs to go into building a skyscraper. Then at the end, it can't be built. That'd be very embarrassing, and no company would do that. That is essentially what Jesus is saying here, that it is wise to plan ahead. This is in line with other verses in the Bible that speak of the wisdom of planning ahead, such as the two verses that we see here. Budgeting fits with this because budgeting is a plan for how you're about to spend your money. Now on to our second point. Budgeting helps with financial self-control, and it helps prevent overspending. How many times have you been to the store and saw something that you thought you had to have and then you bought it? That is called an impulse buy. And an impulse buy account for a large percentage of the buys in retail stores. Think of sales like Black Friday, where people see a sale and then they go impulsively buy something because they think it's a good deal. And yeah, sometimes you are getting a good deal. But you have to be careful because you can overspend on sales like that, such as Black Friday. But when you have a budget, you're limited in exactly what you can and cannot spend. This will help with impulse buy because you'll see, oh, here's this, I want it. And then you'll be like, oh wait, if I do this, I'll overspend on my budget and I won't have room for eating out or this bill or something else. Third, budgets help plan for the unexpected. Unfortunately, unexpected things are going to happen, such as natural disasters, sudden breaks in your house, and so on. That is why in a budget it's always a good idea to have money set aside for these things. If your car breaks down, you're going to want the money to pay for a tow or a mechanic or something like that. Finally, budgeting allows one to save money for bigger purchases, such as vacations, a car, and stuff like that. If you're able to set aside a little bit of money every month, you'll eventually be able to save up enough to make a down payment on a car or go on a vacation you want. These 4 reasons are very good reasons that you should have a budget. And I hope that you'll make a budget and save yourself time, heartache, and save money for other things that you may need or want. Alright, let's get down to actually creating a budget. First, we need to get together some info. First, your income. This is your take-home pay, not your pre-tax pay. Second, your debts and their minimum payments, such as house, car, rental, etc. Third, your bills. This is stuff like your utilities and your phone and so on. Fourth, other necessary monthly expenses, such as food, gas, etc. Finally, other non-essentials that you pay for monthly, and make sure that you keep a separate category for this, because you're going to want to list your necessary expenses and your non-necessary expenses, and we'll see why later. Alright, after getting together all that information, list them all with how much you typically spend on them. In this example, we see a listed income of $4,000, and then we see a mortgage payment, a car payment, a phone payment, utilities, food, gas. Then in the non-essentials area, we see eating out and entertainment. We also see savings for whatever you may want and an emergency fund. Also notice the buffer at the bottom, which we'll get into later. Alright, so now hopefully you've listed all your items. So add up all the items in your budget and look at the total. Is it positive, is it negative, or is it zero? And before we move on to the next step, make sure you double check this because it'll be very important. The positive, negative, or zero will determine a lot about how you structure your budget. All right, if your budget turned out to be positive, that is good. You have some extra money. However, we want it to all equal zero because we want to plan out where all the money goes, not just most of it. So put some of this extra into savings. You can also leave some as a buffer, which I recommend because, again, unexpected things will happen and you may need a buffer. Also, after you do that, you should just put the rest into other categories, and this could even be some fun categories if you want, like eating out, but just add money until you get the budget to equal zero. Then, once it is zero, you're done. However, what if the budget is negative? If the budget is negative, you're technically in debt budget-wise. You're spending more money than you bring in, which is not a good thing. If this happens, first you should eliminate non-essentials until the budget equals zero. Hopefully you will not have to take away too many to get it equal zero, but in some cases you may have to remove non-essentials for a month or a few months while you are figuring this out. After that, if it's still negative, check to make sure you're not overpaying or overestimating on essential things like food, services, or any other bills. One good example is a power bill. Power companies every other month come and check your meter. If you report on your bill each month, typically it will be lower because usually their estimate is higher. So if you're looking to save money, that might be a good thing to do to make sure you report to your power company the numbers on your meter every single month. If it's still negative after doing all that, see if you can lower any bills by refinancing or getting a lower plan on one of your bills or subscriptions. A good example would be like Verizon. Say you are on the 3rd tier plan, well then you maybe go down to a 2nd tier plan or a 1st tier plan if you need to save some money for that month. This is something that's pretty common, and it's relatively simple to go up and down in plans. Finally, if it's still negative, consider maybe having to sell a few things or a side hustle to make up the money. Obviously, this is not ideal, but it is better than going into debt like a credit card or just simply not having the money. It is not a great option, but it is still a better option if you have to. And finally, if you still have a negative balance after all this, you may need to ask someone for help. Have them look over your budget and maybe get some advice on what you could do to get that budget to zero. All right, if your budget is zero or is now at zero after you make adjustments, good job. You have created a good budget sheet and we are ready to move on to the next step. Living on a budget. When you're living on a budget, first, you obviously want to create the budget. But after you create the budget, there are 3 things you then need to do. First, you need to stick to it. Resist the urge to impulse buy, or if you must, like on Black Friday, create a line in your budget for that. So, for example, if you know Black Friday is coming up, know what you want to buy beforehand and before the sales come. Then put a line in your budget for this and that on Black Friday. That will help you not to impulse buy on Black Friday, and you will save money because you didn't impulse buy. Second, you will need to track your budget. You need to update your budget with the actual amounts so far spent on each line, and we'll see this a little bit in the next slide. Finally, adjust your budget if needed. Sometimes payments will be less than we actually thought, or they'll be more than we actually thought, and you need to adjust that on your budget whenever it happens. So for example, if your power bill is $100 more, that needs to be reflected in the budget. Alright, here we can see an example of living on a budget. Notice here that I've listed so far. This is as you're keeping track. So mortgage, let's say we just paid that, car payment paid that, phone payment that's due on the 15th, so we remember pay that, and then when we pay it, we put paid. And notice I did not put the amount. That is because you are paying the minimum payment, so paid is just the same as this amount right here. Notice also in this line we have gas. We have not used the full $100 yet. Instead, we've only used $20.92 in gas so far this month. And as you get gas, you will update this price. Same over here with the non-essentials. We see we've only used about $25 eating out so far and $10 in entertainment. As you eat out and use entertainment, you will update that number. And then down here, we see the buffer. That will be for things that maybe you underpaid on and you need to pay that, which happens with bills sometimes, or other even non-essential expenses, or even tips. All right, so yay, you just spent 1 month on a budget. Now what do? You create a new budget and take into account what you spent in the previous month. The previous month will have told you exactly how you go about spending your money, and that will be very helpful in creating your new budget. Also make sure to add a line for any overflow from the previous month next to income. This will be either positive or negative depending on the overflow, and you will hope that it will be positive, because if it's negative, then that means you spent too much money and you will need to go back to your budget and see exactly what happened that you overspent. Then stick to it, track it, and adjust it again just like in the previous month. Alright, and that is the end of the video. Have fun budgeting, and I hope this was helpful. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and recommend us to a friend.